Recognizing Opportunities, prepared for and presented at the 2016 Square One Entrepreneurship Training Program. Square One is a program of the Center for Emerging Technologies. CET is an affiliate of the Cortex Innovation Community. Square One is funded in part by the Missouri Technology Corporation.
The focus tonight is on recognizing opportunities at any level of size and at any level of scale. And tonight will be successful in my eyes if you come out of here thinking about things in a new light, potential partners in areas of the business that you hadn't previously considered. So that's why the subtitle here is Always Be Selling in a Limited Resource Environment. We'll get into what we mean by selling. It's not just cash flow selling, it's selling ideas, it's selling partnerships. In a limited resource environment, to make sure that we're crystal clear, is you, because you are all small companies. So the runway's not as long as it is for like, oh, I don't know, a Procter & Gamble or somebody like that. So you always have to be looking for ways to extend it. So a couple of things by way of background, just because we're on tape, although you guys might know already. I'm an entrepreneur that hit the recession and hit it hard. I liken it to Wile E. Coyote with the rocket strapped on his back, and then he realizes he can't steer and he hit the cliff. So the recession was my cliff. Prior to the entrepreneurial experience, I had been a product manager at a number of different firms. I'd run new product development for a gentleman who's now the CEO of the Toro Company. I had been the number 2 at a private equity held firm out in Cincinnati, and had been in the consumer goods space as a product manager at Colgate-Palmolive in New York City, and before that worked in business development at Purina. And the entrepreneurial experience that I had was actually in construction equipment. We manufactured compact construction equipment. Our first year, we went from 0 to $3 million. It was a good first year. The problem was the recession, and that's really what kind of got me into this, was sort of this St. Louis Makes, the organization that I had now, is a bridge between all of those experiences that I'd had. So I guess what I share that with you. I share that because we're on film, so somebody's watching this that's not in the class that doesn't know me now knows at least enough of my background. But then I also share that with you because I want to reinforce the notion that I don't see myself, nor should you see me, as an expert that's coming in and sitting in front of everybody. You know, in many respects, we're all on the same team, we're all in the same boat, because we all have unique experiences that everybody else can learn from. And that's really the dialogue that I want to encourage and I want to keep going, at least with our cohort and our group. And that kind of leads me to this slide. So to manage expectations for tonight's discussion, everybody has their own style, and I've seen a few people in presentations in the entrepreneurial ecosystem that have now gotten themselves to the point where they can do presentations without any slides at all, which I think is awesome. But that one's already taken, and that I'm not there yet. But where I am, and something that has been really beneficial to me, I think really beneficial to people that I've worked with recently, is using this product camp or this unconference format. And the unconference format is really a peer learning driven format. So you don't save the questions till the end. You just raise your hand as soon as something comes to mind. If you have something that you want to share it in real time. As soon as it comes to mind, just raise your hand and let's get it out there. Because as I see this, we get down to some point on here I wrote, a really good presentation from my standpoint is the one that never finishes its slide deck. Because you get enough questions and enough experiences from the audience that the learning really goes and focuses on a lot of experiences that we all benefit from learning about that I might not personally be the point person or the leader on. So the other thing too is the peer learning. Does this have a pointer on it? Oh, there you go. So okay, check this out. Watch this. See peer learning right there. Contribute or get called on. That or get called on part right there. Hi, you Sheik, all the way in the back. So your Sheik is sick today. I'm sorry. You could get called on even though you're sick, because you can't get me sick from back there. So you can still share experiences. I think that there's a lot that I've learned from people in the class, and I want to continue to reinforce that. Even if we've heard those stories, there's no such thing, I think, in this class and at this stage for many of our businesses as hearing them too many times. So then this is for anybody that's going to point out to me that, yes, of course, we know there's a great deal of variability across industries, in spite of which some of the best learning comes from across industries. So we want to make sure that while we're respectful of that, not everything is going to be the same for everybody's business. it also prompts thinking that we hadn't previously encountered or might not have encountered and run into. So our objective today then is to understand the breadth and importance of seeking partnership opportunities. And my objective right now is to learn which arrow advances the slides. Okay, so ideas are a product that you are always selling. And what we mean by that is, cash flow is great, but there are a lot of different ways to extend your runway, and to be certain, cash flow is absolutely one of them. But then there are also other ways that you can extend your runway, and those are some of the ideas that we want to think about. So instead of just always looking at somebody and saying, oh man, I wonder if Tasha's going to buy some products from our company today, thinking of ways that maybe there's something that she brings to the table. Maybe she has some logistics. Maybe she's got some excess capacity in a truck that's going someplace. Maybe she's got a particular relationship at a retail account that we've really been trying to learn about and get into. So what are some of the other ways that we can work with people outside of what we're always thinking about, which is closing business, closing checks, that are essentially ideas that we're selling people on? Because when you encounter somebody, they might not be thinking of anything other than what you're thinking on. And at face value, if you're always thinking about selling and they're always thinking about selling, you could be sitting on some of the largest opportunities to share resources or to leverage resources and completely miss that because you're not asking a broad enough set of questions. So in that context, the opportunity is really thinking like a product manager or thinking like a general manager, and keeping ourselves focused on all parts of the business, even the parts of the business that we're not naturally drawn to. I think that's where a part of the challenge is. When ideas come to us naturally, they're always in our strongest suite. I never randomly get logistics ideas because I hate thinking about logistics. That's not my thing. But I could put together an account program in my sleep because I really enjoy doing that, and there's a sense of reward for it because somebody pays you for it. So think about the things, what we want to learn is to focus on the things that are outside of our areas. Brad?
What's an account program?
An account program might be, say, an account said, well, the holidays are coming up, is there going to be some kind of a special? Well, sure, there's going to be a special, and here's what it's going to look like. And it's going to tie to this media that we're running, and it's going to tie to this online activity that we have. We're going to have these people in store. So as a result, there's a whole program. It's not just me selling you cards. It's me bringing you a sense of the holidays into the aisle, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, there's something there that makes it a special, unique offering for whoever the account is. I'm going to use a lot of retail examples today. So this stuff also applies maybe with different language and a slightly different tweak in a B2B environment. It doesn't mean that thinking about partnerships only applies to consumer companies. It just means that that tends to be the language, and those tend to be the examples that people understand the most readily, and that that tie to, I think, a lot of the businesses that we've discussed in class. That was a good question, though, and stop me like that if I hit anything that's jargony.
Can I ask another question?
Yes, of course.
So I don't know how this will fit in exactly, but one of the things that I'm always trying to stay open to is, in my industry, generally speaking, there's this path, this sort of generic path that people take. They do cards, and then they do calendars, and then they do mugs, and then they do tea towels, and I think that's a terrible path because it's irrelevant to your voice at the very most basic level. Anyways, so I'm always trying to think of how to expand that's relevant to me specifically, that doesn't follow this generic paper-making path. And that's going to probably relate to everybody in here anyways. But I wanted to put that out there just so that if what you're saying can somehow jive with that openness.
We have a section where we talk about sales opportunities, and I think that the first things that come to mind when you say that are there ways that you could partner with or find sales channels or outlets, or prepare yourself to be attractive to sales channels and outlets that are non-traditional, that don't go down that path, and I don't know if these are appropriate for you. These might cause you to laugh. It's not my industry, I don't know, but I don't know, are national park gift stores an opportunity for you? And does that open a whole slew of other products to you where your creativity and your voice can shine in ways that, may be forced to the more, what'd you call it, the more routine path of a traditional retailer that you wouldn't be allowed to? a museum gift store is an option that, maybe if you started there, would be a higher margin, more forgiving, easier to work with, broader voice sort of experience that was not, that was not that sort of boring, oh gosh, what do you think we can get into Target this year type selling experience.
And right, no, that's exactly right. And then how can that parlay into new product?
That's a really, that's the kind of thinking that we want. Because if you think about it, so now not only are you not standing here at Walmart, sitting here looking down the aisle of boring, no offense to Walmart, you're all the way over here in gift stores. So now you're thinking, okay, I can represent myself in all these different ways, but other ways that you can represent yourself are by coming at them with products and or taking that learning into other areas. So you might find from that experience that, I don't know, maybe there's a unique opportunity for a real high-end, really differentiated voice in the corporate space. Maybe there's a trade show opportunity there. Maybe there are little micro alliances like that are sort of single owner or single manager controlled, so they don't take up a lot of your time from a sales and an account management standpoint, and they enable you to get a high quality product in at a more favorable margin to yourself, and you're sort of the only game in those towns. I don't know if those are options for you. I don't know if there's a corporate option in what you do. I don't know if there's a trade show or trade organization option in what you do or what those might look like. But I can see that by following that path, you're eventually asking people and encountering people through non-traditional retail or otherwise, you're eventually going to find something that resonates. You're going to find an opportunity or an area to plug in. And when you do, the upside in some of these are, you're trading off turns. So, you're not going to, your sell-through, the volume of units that you have across the shelf at a Target is, I keep using Target as an example, but any really large established retail account is going to be much higher. But you're gaining margin, you're gaining some product breadth as well, you're gaining some other things that offset that somewhat. You're gaining greater control. So, in theory, that should translate into more favorable cost structure for you. You get into an account like a Target or a Walmart and, they expect that you should be 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. It's 2:59 in the morning. Why didn't you pick up the phone? It's that. It might be a bit of an exaggeration, but you get a general idea about the demands that those accounts can put on you. And you tend not to have those in these more one-on-one working relationships. So pursuing something like that might have some advantages for you in other ways. And I can see where I feel, it would be worth exploring and certainly have some margin advantages, profit margin advantages. Any other questions? So another thing that the red one does, okay, there we go. See, look at this. At the end of the night, I should have learned how to do this. Does anybody want to chase this? I have a laser pointer. So any opportunity to extend your startup runway. So cash might not be king, but it's the crown prince if you've got to pay your bills. So we're not arguing about whether or not there are other things that you need to be focused on. If you can use this as a means to put off having to think about cash so that you can think of those things, that's awesome. If you're not spending money on a distribution system because you were able to cut a partnership or a deal with somebody that had access to the market that you were trying to build up access in, that's cash that you don't have to worry about putting, or at least as much cash that you might not have to worry about putting forward. So there are ways that there are direct benefits to your life, especially your economic life as a small company or a small organization. So we already discussed opportunities should not be limited to product sales. And the best way I think to put this in perspective is to think backwards from where you want to be. So if you have a business model canvas and you've put together a draft plan and there's an executive summary, maybe a couple of pages, not something super complex, but just a couple of documents that you can put in front of you that you feel really, really represent where you want the business to be in 3 years and 5 years down the road. You can say, okay, if I want this business to be an X number of accounts and I want these accounts to be X sized in terms of their prominence and their reach and what we're able to do with them in terms of dollar volume, what do I need to do to get there? Well, maybe you need engineering expertise that under the best of circumstances you might not be able to afford. So what's an example if you are looking for engineering expertise and you have access to a firm that maybe manufactures metal, has an engineer on staff, but you have access to what potentially for them could be a new market. Your product, heating and cooling, kick plates on doors, any kind of decor that you can make out of metal for a home or an office environment, something that they could make that you understand how to get out into the marketplace, they could bring some engineering expertise to. So I think a lot of times what you see, especially as small companies, or what we think as small companies, is that the only thing that's going to work is if I get this idea laid out on paper so perfectly that angel investors can't help but give me the money that I need to go buy a factory. The silence is on purpose. I'm going to be silent again so that can sink in. To go buy a factory is about the worst thing that you could possibly do right now, unless, of course, you're Sequana, who actually would know how to run a factory. But for the most part, think about it from a share of mind standpoint. Running a factory is a completely different set of skills. Running an engineering department is a completely different set of skills. Is that something that you want to be focused on when your attention right now needs to be on customers and market building? So partnerships that bring you engineering expertise, partnerships that bring you production expertise are really good things right now, because those are things that could potentially extend your runway and shorten the timeline that you need to get into the market. If you're dealing with an already established engineering department, an already established production facility where you already have experienced staff in place, those are things that you don't have to learn trial and error. Those are things that you don't have to do. So you've got upside that directly impacts your runway as a startup or a small business. Production efficiency and capacity. Under the best of circumstances, if you went out and made investment at this stage in production, you're maybe one account or one business, one new contract away from that production being out of sync with what your marketplace realities are. So if you have somebody that's already got a system that's hyper efficient and that has a really good forecasting mechanism and model in place, that's another area where you can take some cost out of your own system by partnering with someone else. Yes, you're giving up margin, you might be giving up equity, but you were already willing to give that up to an angel investor to give you the money that you thought you needed to go buy a factory in the first place. So seeking partnerships brings you not people that just have financial understanding, but people that actually have an understanding of all aspects of the business that you are not grounded in, that can help to create a business where right now there's not necessarily one. Distribution access is another one. A lot of times, I love it, you'll talk to somebody, they've got a something, fill in the blank with whatever that something is, and they've sold a couple. And maybe they sold one to their mom's friend at the bridge club, and then that worked out so well, they put it on Etsy, and now they've sold 2, so they've sold 3 in total. And you ask them, what are you gonna do with this thing that you're making? And they'll look at you deadpan earnestness, and they'll say, well, we're gonna get that into Amazon. Like, it happens like that, and what does that mean? I mean, the best case scenario as an entrepreneur that you're thinking of at that point could prove to be your absolute undoing. I mean, what if it goes really, really, really well on Amazon and you can't deliver any of them because you're used to making 3 of them because you're running an Etsy store? You got problems. So working with people that already have vendor numbers, that already have experience managing business in different vendor relationships can help you to set up a strategy, a plan for managing accounts in a way that really is much more conducive to your growth and profitability and isn't jumping straight out of the frying pan right into the fire. Regulatory knowledge, there are other issues. Any questions or? Yes, ma'am?
Okay. When you talk about, when we worked on our pitch the first or the second night we were here, that was really good, and it came back to bite me because when we went to, they had Kevin Durant's mother was here for some INC thing. I did not know that they were wanting people to do pictures. So, and she was like, "Hey, you gonna do a picture?" I was like, "No." I was not ready. I was not prepared. That my friend was like, "I'm gonna do it, so you should do it." And I went and did it, but it made me feel like I know I need to practice it more, but I'm an introvert. So I didn't have my product with me. If my product's with me, then I light up. But if I'm just talking to someone and they're just staring me in the face, And not only that, there were a lot of nice people there to meet. I mean, my friend met people to help her out in different things in her business, but I was just totally like, just sitting there. I don't know why. It's hard for me to talk to people.
So I believe you, and I feel that. And I'm not you, so I don't know what that's like for you. The only thing I have that I can share is my experiences overcoming and getting through that. The first couple of times that I practiced in front of a mirror 2 or 3 times, and it had absolutely zero impact on anything. It didn't calm me down, it didn't make the presentation any better, it didn't make me talk at a more modulated pace, it did nothing. But my survival depended on me getting out there and getting in front of people economically. It's not like I was being chased by bears or tigers or something, but economically, the survival of the business pushed me out in front of people. And where I really started to feel that it had an impact was at well over, guess how many presentations?
5?
No. It was about 100. After I'd made about 100 presentations. Now, they're not all presentations like this. They might be, I've never met Christy before, would you have coffee with me and talk to me as an entrepreneur? Hey, here's what I'm looking at, who should I meet? You seem really well connected, what other people should I be talking to? But those are difficult and those are really nervous. And, the reality is that that's something that's learned, but it's not learned easily. So there are 2 things I think that I could do in hindsight to make that different for me. One of them is fight it, but that's not going to change the physics. It's not physics, it's psychology. It's not going to change the reality. And the other is to embrace it as quickly as possible so that I can work through it as quickly as possible. So there was a piece that I read about human psychology, which is distilled down in my mind to the 2,000 and the 10,000 hour rule. And it all started with Michael Jordan before he was anybody. He was a high school ball player. He would show up like an hour and a half before the rest of his class just to shoot free throws because he was concerned that he wasn't hitting his numbers. And the whole 2,000 and 10,000 hour thing is that if you can do something for 2,000 hours, you can become a high enough amateur that you can sort of hold your own with the pros. You do something to 10,000 hours and you gain a mastery of that skill such that you are knowledgeable, you are very credible, you can speak, you can do what you do. So, I think about the amount of time that I've been doing this, and then I think about the sort of subcomponents to that, Do I have my 2,000 hours in yet presenting? And it might not take you 2,000 hours. It's going to be a curve that looks kind of like that, but that beginning part of the curve, the part where you sweat every time you look at someone, that's where you are right now. And the faster you get through that part so that you come up here where the learning is still great, but you're not sweating anymore and you're really eager to make the presentations and do all the rest of this. It's an S, and that's what you got to get to.
So I might suggest that you find some friendlies, meaning your friends, literally, and practice with them because the threshold, the risk involved is really low. So it's a good way to do it. You might also start by coming up with a presentation on something you know inside and out. So when I first started public speaking, I did how to make a bow because my father was a florist and he had taught me how to make bows by hand, right? And so I could stand up in front of a whole group of people and tell you the steps that went into making a bow, like an instructional kind of thing, right? But I knew it cold. Like, I didn't have to think about it. I could just say, you're going to take out this much ribbon, and you're going to fold the first fold like this, and then you're going to fold the second fold like that, which could just get you comfortable with giving that kind of presentation, and then you can change the content up to something more risky, like this precious venture that you're put together.
Yeah, but Mark, like you said, you need to always be ready to explain.
And you need to always be ready.
I was in shock. I was like, what? No. I thought she was just going to tell us a story and going to sign autographs, but no, it was all about business. And Yashika was ready. I was so proud.
Oh, Yashika, you must be spontaneously well because you have your hand up.
And just really quick, because our voice
Do not get Al sick.
But no, I mean, I totally feel where she's coming from because I used to call myself the introvert. All throughout high school, I wouldn't talk to anyone, but I would suggest just talking to people in general. I mean, making conversation, and it will get you accustomed to being around people, talking to people, and then sharing your idea. It's yours, it's your baby, so no one will be as excited as you are ever about your idea. So you have to bring those people in. I did ask you, like, are you gonna share? I was excited about her idea. I'm like, you need to share this, and she was like, oh no. So I would just suggest just start talking to people, period. You know, if it's about the weather, if it's about work, you just have to get accustomed to having that conversation, and then once you bring in the love of what you do, then it will be like a breeze. But just get out there and start talking.
You have a 15-second video on your phone of you doing your reveal when you start, right? So even if you don't have your prototype with you, you have your prototype with you.
So the best advice that I could give myself in hindsight, back to when I was starting, is to listen to yourself and not listen to yourself more than you listen to others. I mean, Yashika's advice is good, and that came from someone else, and I would listen to that. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't feel right to you, you got to be yourself. So if you see somebody that's a supposed expert in how to present, and they say, oh, you know, and here's the format, you have to do it, forget about it. If that's not your, you know, yeah, if that, you know, it's just not, you know. And if you see somebody like Yashika or me, and we're getting really excited because I've had a lot of coffee, and that's not your style, don't do that, you know. But at the same time, there's a market and an audience for what you do, and that market and that audience is stronger, and I feel that you would resonate with them better when you're being yourself and when you're being comfortable.
And I still sweat all the time. I mean, I have to go into like somebody else. I'm like, okay, I'm salt and pepper today. Like when I walk out on the stage, I'm literally somebody else.
So here's the other thing, and I'll leave this topic on this note. You know, something else that I learned, read this somewhere, don't know if it's true, sounds like it makes sense to me, that a bone heals stronger where it's been broken. So whatever your weakness is, when you learn to overcome it, it will actually be a strength. There's nothing scientific about that. It's just sort of a qualitative way to put things in context, but it's true. I mean, I didn't used to like doing this, and Yashika claims that she didn't either. And I tell people about Yashika's presentation because it's so awesome. You know, I think there's a story that has to go into it, and you'll find a way to do that as well. Rebecca.
Well, when we had our first week, and I stood up there, and I had that bow tie in my hand, I said, well, I'm not going to even try doing this, I dropped or something. And so each time I go to Adventure Cafe, I've been showing it tying it at least 10 times. And so recently somebody says, well, it looks like you've been tying this, you've done this a few times. And I thought, well, yeah, that's a big difference over a period of a couple of months. What I was going to suggest, in addition to the video of you showing the reveal, is just take the cup from a shirt that you converted and keep that in your purse. I'm always pulling bow ties out of my purse. I mean, seriously, it's just really weird. But if you have just the cup, so you can just show how it looks completely like it's a button-down cup, but then you show that it's easy access. That would be an easy thing to do.
So I want to get back to point about the partnerships. So the whole point of starting with that is because you're going to have failures. You want to get them out of the way as soon as possible. So whenever you hit one, instead of saying, oh my gosh, I'm not worthy, just simply say, look, you know, that was a bit of my tuition that I now do not have to pay. I've already paid that. So you just incrementally get stronger by paying your tuition. Okay, so what works in a partnership when you're trying to cut a side deal with somebody? What works? We will go over this a number of different times, but there are two things on here that we want to take away, and we're going to go over all of these things. Number one is keep it simple, and number two is responsibility. If nobody owns responsibility for the outcome on either side of the partnership, you're done before you've started. Number one. Number two, if you can't explain it to a 5-year-old, even if the lawyers and the accountants make it complex, if the cover sheet cannot be, you know, maybe not a 5-year-old, but you get the general idea. It's got to be pretty straightforward. Otherwise, it's going to get lost, especially as a small company. So partnerships, as a generalization, are mutually beneficial long-term. They afford you or your partner access to something that you or they might not have. In their case, you might be the product champion that they lack. They maybe are another small business and they've got great production capabilities and they've even got some distribution built out, but it's super boring and they lack someone that's really dedicated to a product. They don't have a product management model where there's somebody who's compensated to be the champion. So you could bring that market perspective to an organization. That could be something that you're trading to them. You know, other side of the coin, they could bring production capabilities, they could bring distribution capabilities that save you a couple of years having to build them out. Financial upside to grow with your business. What was the guy that spoke a couple of weeks ago? What was his name? Donald Trump or something like that? What was that guy's name?
Charles.
Ah, yes, Charles. Charles said.
That's not Donald Trump, and that is not fair.
So, you know, one of the things I think that benefited his business was that you had two companies in his dominant partner that were at the right stage of their business that then went mega. You know, so finding that is called winning the lottery, okay? Winning the lottery is mathematically so impossible, so improbable as to be statistically impossible. All you're looking to do is consistently hit singles. As entrepreneurs, I think as society, we focus on people that can hit grand slam home runs. And we fail to realize that the guy that might or might not make the Baseball Hall of Fame that consistently hits singles gets paid really well, because you can always count on him to consistently hit singles, and those count. So what you're looking to do is find somebody that can grow with the business, but it doesn't have to be a grand slam home run. You're trying to find somebody that you can partner with. You're both at the same stage. You're both appropriately sized for one another. You're not going to get lost in their corporate bureaucracy. They got some upside. The gentleman that was here that had that going for him when his company was small and his partner company was small was able to, because those relationships were so neatly dovetailed together, they were able to co-develop the technology. I mean, they had a great deal of input and back and forth. So those are things that you're looking for as well. Project ownership, if there's nobody that owns the outcomes, then it's not going to get done. And that's got to be on both sides. I mean, if your CEO, in this case you, tells someone in your organization, oh yeah, partnership's a great idea, and it never ever works its way back into the conversations by which you judge the success of that individual, or the quarterly, monthly, weekly meetings that you have to review the business, then it's just not important enough to survive. And the same holds true on the other side of the equation. We talked about that a little bit. We talked about that a little bit. You know, aligned interests is also good. If you're a consumer company and you've got a partner, I do not know how zoo animals do it. I just don't. I mean, this is absurd. This is ridiculous. If I was in a zoo, I would have my tail amputated. This is. I do not know what it's like. How about this? This will look. Does this look okay? So so aligned interests, if you were a consumer goods company and your partner, their strategic direction has them focused on more B2B accounts, that might not be a real good relationship for you. That might not be a good fit, because their strategy, their emphasis, their work is all going to center around how do we open B2B accounts, and your work's all going to center around, gee, how do we get into the customer's kitchen? So you've got to be aligned in your interests. Before we get off of this slide, did I mention? Keep it simple. Yeah. Responsibility. So I was at a $50 million a year company, and somebody thought it would be a great idea if we had a highly regulated product that we worked on with a counterpart company across an international border where nobody on either side had responsibility for the project. What do you think the chances were that that worked out super, super well? Yeah, they were nil. So don't do that. End of story. So the potential upside, we've talked about this. I'll cover a couple that maybe we haven't discussed as thoroughly. Increase your company market and profile. So one thing that partnerships can do is they give you bragging rights. So when I had my erosion control company, we did $3 million a year in our first year. $1 million of that was to Caterpillar. You don't think for a second that every single potential customer and account that I called on, I didn't brag about having Caterpillar as our big customer. You can get bragging rights out of some of your partner accounts. So that was a sales partnership, a much more traditional relationship, but nonetheless. Stronger sales team. If you're sitting there thinking, man, how do I build out a sales force? I built out a broker sales force one time and had 44 feet on the street in like 6 weeks. There is no way I could have done that if I'd had to pay for that and fund that all myself. By getting into somebody else's portfolio and building from there, we were able to build something that we otherwise would never have had access to. You know, for people whose products require specialized testing, engineering, or chemicals, wet labs and facilities are super expensive. For people whose businesses are consumable, food, kitchens are super expensive. Access to labs and facilities through partnerships, really good opportunity to seek something like that, to save some money, extend your runway through partnerships. We talked about most of the rest of this stuff already. Does anybody have any questions?
I guess I'd like you to speak on the first one. So you're keep saying extend your runway. That's assuming you have one.
That is correct. That is a good point.
There's a runway that has opportunity to extend, meaning money. So again, how many months you have? None. Then what? You know, how these partnerships work? There's nobody left.
You know, that's a really good.
Yeah.
That is an awesomely good question, because I would look at it from a completely different standpoint. It's going to fall back more on it's going to be much more you dependent. You know, so do I believe that you are going to be able to do these things if you partnered with my organization? And if I can believe that, then I'm much more likely to cut a side deal. So that might be the Kickstarter or the creator. You know, so for example, I don't know, making this up again, and it's close to what I do. Knowing you and knowing your corporate experience and your academic experience, if you were a small company, there's probably not a good chance they're going to be able to afford you. So to be able to bring in somebody that has Fortune 500 expertise and has some ideas around building a product in a market, as long as you're not trying to cut an equity deal with DuPont or a like and similarly sized company, for a small or mid-sized firm, that's a game of let's make a deal, because now I'm gaining access to someone that has an understanding of how things work, has specific market knowledge that could be very valuable that I might not be able to otherwise get. So that could get whatever it is that you want to do, that could find you the partner essentially to kickstart whatever idea it is that you're shopping. Like, I know if you had a mechanically engineered product, there are firms in town that are fairly decent, really pretty robust at making stuff and pretty robust at managing the numbers, you know, the financial numbers. But they're not real good at building markets. They're not real good at coming up with next generation ideas. If you come in there with an idea that's on something more than a cocktail napkin, you know, I mean, they see that every week, you know. Can you make this? It's a number 2 pencil drawing on a half-wet martini napkin. No, I can't make that. Get out of here. But you get somebody that comes in and says, you know what, I've taken some trouble or some time, and I've put this into a set of drawings, and you know, it shows fairly comprehensively what we're talking about, and here's what I want to design, and here's what I need to design. You don't have to go like the full business plan. You show somebody something that convinces them that, you know, you're a little bit different than what they see with the guys coming here with the cocktail napkin and the number 2 pencil. You know, maybe it's time to play. Let's make a deal with you. I've actually had those conversations with people in the St. Louis marketplace, and you can get somebody in that $10 million a year range, $5 million a year range, $15 million a year range. Because for somebody like that, if they bring you in and you're able to add $3-4 million in business, which in the grand scheme of things is not that much, that's a huge bump on their sales line. So yeah, I would think that, you know, in your case, that might be a very interesting conversation. But you're right. I mean, how do you get a runway in the first place? It's a really good question.
And that's what I heard. So you discussed how to get a runway. Because the answer isn't, I don't have a runway. You know, which is where some folks could go. Sorry, everyone needs a runway. So I've had folks call me and say, you know, where can I apply for money? And you know, I say, well, if you qualify for this or this or this is the process. And I had one guy come back to me and he's like, well, I'm a realtor. If I just sold 3 more houses, I could get that amount. And I said, go sell 3 more houses. It's a quicker path to cash, right? So we need to go sell 3 more houses so he could do the next thing. So he bought himself a runway, and then maybe he had to pause, and then he could buy himself a little bit more runway. But you always have to have some sort of runway. Even
Might
if
just-
it's, I'm gonna not take a paycheck.
Yeah, I was just going there.
Right?
That's a runway.
Right, that's a runway. I'm not gonna take a paycheck for, in my case, 7.5 months, right? I'm gonna live off what's in the bank, I'm gonna live off my husband's benevolence, but I'm not contributing to the bottom line. And the thing I happen to have gone into business with could take my personal capacity, right? And then I could sell the first thing, and then I could hire the next person I needed. So I manufactured runway, essentially.
Downside. There's some downside. We've talked about these. A couple more to keep in mind. I think if you're entering a partnership with someone, you might not get the answers to these questions, but it's my personal opinion that you have the right to ask about their financial stability and about their long-term strategic plan. You know, they might not be used to being asked that, but on the other hand, you know, you're a little bit higher in than what they're used to dealing with in this capacity. It's not off the table to ask that. And here's why. You know, if you have a partner company that you set a deal up with and all of a sudden they get sold, maybe you want some kind of legal contingency in there that compensates you for any ensuing chaos. Change in senior leadership. If you have an organization that's not owner-manager controlled and all of a sudden the manager's out of disfavor and somebody new comes in and they want to put their thumbprint all over everything else, you know, that could really short your business. You need to understand and have some pills or some contingencies built into your documentation. You know, we already talked about the rest of this stuff for the most part. So, you know, to prove the point that partnerships occur at all sizes, just to give you some sense of how even large corporations don't always have everything they need. So General Mills, I think we all know General Mills. Caribou Coffee is a large, but nowhere near as large as General Mills company. At the time they did a partnership, Caribou had, I think, $80 million, $100 million a year in net revenue. They were in, I think, a third of the US states and a couple of countries. And there is absolutely no way, even at that size, they could have built out the distribution network in American grocery retail that General Mills had. So they basically cut a partnership deal that got them into General Mills. Now understand, if you're a consumer good, when you're in a partnership deal with a company that has the reach and the clout of a General Mills or a Procter & Gamble, you're like 6 weeks to being on the shelf in 90% of the retail distribution in the US. Try doing that on your own. It will not happen. So for a company that's able to cut a deal of that size and bring something unique to the table and gain access to a sales force, what an awesome opportunity to really, really scale your business. Now, obviously, at that level of scale, there were a bunch of considerations behind the scenes that I wasn't privy to. Presumably, somebody's production had to ramp up or you needed some co-production partners, but I got to assume that Mills probably was able to help with that as well. So partnerships, even for large corporations, can be a good deal. You know, here's another one. We always think, well, you know, I'm under-resourced. I'm the only one that doesn't have anything. So General Mills is really well known in the United States, has a lot of really, really good cereal brands, maybe not good in, you know, I mean, the, you know, stuff that has little dried marshmallows. It's good for me. You know, I like this stuff. And there's a lot of it, and it's got a lot of sugar in it, so it keeps you awake until late at night. Nestle is, I believe, the largest consumer goods company in the world, Swiss-based, just a massive company. In spite of their size and scale, they didn't have the appropriate formulations in the cereal category for Europe. General Mills is so US-centric, they didn't really have the execution that they needed, the access that they needed to markets in Europe. So these two, as I recall, some 20 years ago, I believe it was, don't quote me on that, might have been a little less. I believe it was just a proper joint venture that they set up outright, where they both made contributions to and had an ownership stake in an autonomous-ish third-party entity that was set up and managed to basically, I don't know where that is now, I don't know how long it lasted. The simple fact that it was created in the first place is the point I'm trying to make. I mean, here are two global behemoths, and they still have benefit and upside by partnering on some of the very things that we're talking about smaller organizations needing. So, you know, this always be thinking of doing things differently mentality goes a long way. Here's another one, okay? So these guys over here, they make stuff. I think we all know what they make. It's an apple for those of you that can't see the icon on television. And until recently, you could just basically be fat, dumb, and happy and turn out anything that has sleek lines on it and, you know, boom, just the Apple logo alone, they did super, super well. And now they're starting to look at ways that, maybe, just maybe, that curve flattens, and what are ways that we can get out into other segments. Well, one area, those are awesome computers, laptops, and whatnot, and they sell really well at sort of an end user level, but they're not really an enterprise solution. You have enterprise solutions in Apple that don't really have access to the business decision makers and leaders that they need to have access to. These guys don't make any computers, but they got access to an awful lot of business decision makers, major consulting firms. So when you're selling enterprise, you're not selling a laptop or a notepad. That's a great partnership. I mean, that's just access to markets and sales. Yes, sir, Mr. Bradshaw.
So is that their solution to what IBM did?
I have absolutely no idea if that's their solution or not. I just think it's a neat way of looking at markets, because even a large company that has really successful products is looking at how can they strengthen their position with decision makers in those areas where they also have products but haven't reached the market penetration saturation that they would like to and feel they're capable of. Within the business world, yeah. But the Deloitte partnership, I mean, I think that one was just released or came into the business press, I don't know, a month ago or something like that. But, you think about it, right? I mean, it's Apple, right? I mean, what could they not just do on their own? Well, this is still a partnership that benefits them. Somebody in there is thinking about how to do things in a new and different way to the benefit of the organization. So sales partnerships and strategies, I think we covered a lot of this. So let me try and summarize in the 3 minutes that we've got left. So your products exist because they solve a problem, but in order to sell your products, it's really important to practice your story as much as possible, because the story is essentially you, and that's what comes out and makes it possible. So when you're specifically looking for sales partnerships, make sure that you come out. Why are people going to remember you? Yashika's not here, but you guys can tell her I used her as an example. When Yashika hits that point in her elevator pitch where she says, I was up wrapping up my first batch at 2 a.m, you never forget that with that level of excitement. I mean, that's the American entrepreneur story. You're setting sleep and you're so excited that you can't stop doing what you're doing, and it's 2 a.m. by the time you wrap up. That's a part of her that would make anybody that's looking for a unique product solution that she can offer, or a unique product that she can offer a solution for, that's a part of the story that's going to make me want to do business with her. And that's a part of the story that I'm going to want to work in as a retailer into what I'm telling my customers, and the way the reason, the rationale behind why we have that product in the first place. So that's the you. What's your product's unique selling proposition? How is your product different, and how does it help the buyer? And then this one could be, I just want to point out here, this one could be better titled as, you can still say no. You can always say no. So, you sold 1 to your grandma's friend at the Bridge Club, you sold 2 on Etsy, you got 3 sales, and now you're sitting down in Bentonville, and somebody at Walmart says, oh, that's awesome. We'll buy them from you, but you're going to make less than a penny a unit, and you got to answer the phone within 3 rings, 24/7, 365. You can say no. Not all deals are good deals. So, what value adds can be offered? That's another one. So you're a small company, you have limited production capacity, you look a buyer in the eye, and the buyer says, well, I might be able to do this deal. And you're thinking, man, I'm getting close. So I might look at them and I might say, well, you know what? I can give you an exclusive. If you're willing to act quickly, because we have this offer out, I can give you an exclusive for 6 months. Whoa, I get an exclusive? What did you just say? You just said, I'll give it to you exclusively, right? That's at face value what you just said. What underlies those words? What you've really just said is, hell, I don't have the production capacity to produce anything above and beyond what you're going to take, but I'm not going to tell you that. I'm going to spin that to my advantage. So I'm going to give you an exclusive, and then as soon as I leave here, I'm going to go brag about how you're sucking up all of my production capacity to everybody else, and they better pre-order now. I'm going to spin my disadvantage to my advantage. That's a value add that can be offered. So understand, why is the buyer buying? They got to like you. The story's got to resonate. You have to resonate. The product has to resonate. And as soon as all of that stuff goes away, they're going to get beaten up by their boss on sales turnover. What's the throughput? How fast is it moving on the shelves? How much am I making on it? Do we have any exclusivity or uniqueness? And another thing that retail buyers are getting beaten up on a lot in the last couple of years is sourcing local suppliers. To the extent that when you go to Walmart, they will actually put local supplier stickers on fruits and vegetables so that you don't think that everything comes out of the same farm globally, because it's a really big problem. Consumers love it. It's difficult for them to compete against the high end of the marketplace with the Whole Foods and the Trader Joe's bragging about the quality and the uniqueness of the source of supply. So sourcing local suppliers, whether it's fruits and vegetables or whether it's other products, is a big deal. So how do you alleviate their headaches? Traction counts. Traction does not come in the form of what you sold to your grandmother's friend at the Bridge Club and the 2 units that you sold on the Etsy store. Traction means, I take this business seriously enough. We put this program together that, here are all the social media options that we had, and we deemed these 4 to be our primary, these 3 to be our secondary, and beyond that, we're active-ish. But here's what we've built out in these 3, here's what we've built out in these 4, and here's what we have to show for it in terms of hard data. We're over-indexing the category. We're over-indexing like and similars. We're boom, 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 boom. So here's what that means in terms of sales. Here's what that means in terms of profitability. X number of units have been sold at full price. We've got some traction, and it's legit, real sales traction. It's just not bricks and mortar traction, but the next logical step is for you to place a purchase order with us and take advantage of what we've created online. Yes, Rebecca?
When you're talking about traction, the only thing I know about traction is that it has something to do with product growth.
So traction is just a general catch-all term for a success or a sales story. So traction could be sales traction. Look at all the units, they're really flowing in. Or maybe you're pre-sales and the traction takes the place of some media coverage. What traction do you have? Well, you know what, we're pre-production right now, but we've already been covered in 3 big regional publications. So we've got a lot of traction for where we are in the process. It's the things that you're over-indexing on, maybe it would be another way to put it, that work to your advantage when you're sharing your story. There are going to be costs. The bigger the account, the greater the cost. Don't worry about the big accounts now. Slide over. Any questions? Corey.
I have a question. Can you go back some? Last one. We can't emphasize enough.
Yeah, okay, so we maybe should have read that one. So start small. When your grandmother's telling you, man, my friend really loved that, you should go down to Bentonville and sell millions and millions. You should sell trillions of these. The answer to that question is no. No, you should not. You should start small, you should undersell, and you should over-deliver. By underselling and over-delivering, you get some learning. So it makes it easier for you to get your story down in front of people that can place purchase orders. It's also higher margin business as a generalization. Smaller accounts are generally always more forgiving. So if something blows up, it doesn't make the front cover of a trade publication or blog. It's just a lot easier environment to be in. And by slightly underselling and over-delivering, you create the illusion of always being in demand. You don't want to undersell to the point that you're stuffing your retailer and you're getting in trouble for missing deliveries, but you want to be pushing the envelope as much as you can to create that, hey, this is really hot.
Plus retail, let's just say they ask for an order of 10,000 units, and you only believe the market's going to support, 5,000 units, and they're left with 5,000 units on their shelves. Or if they only bought 5,000 units and they sold all 5,000 units, which do you think is coming back to you for the next order?
Oh, that's such a good point, because guess what's going to happen to the extra 5,000 that didn't sell? Those will be taken as a deduction. Those will randomly show up off of an invoice. You will be compensated for the gap, and then it will take you 2 months to find somebody to explain what I just explained to you. There's a $6 million company in St. Louis that had a $600,000 deduction taken against them at Walmart. What do you think that does? Deduction means Walmart, you're doing business with Walmart. Walmart's looking at the terms of the business, and they've concluded that something about the way you do business has caused them to take a loss or has violated the contract, and there are these provisions that they need to get paid on. So they just deduct them from your invoice. You send them a bill for $1 million, and they say, we're going to pay you $400. And that's it. There is no discussion.
They can do that?
They do that. So be careful. So there's a difference in accounts. Know your accounts, know your strategy, know where you are, know why you're there, and know what you expect to get out of it. So the reason that this is up here is that most people overlook a lot of these sort of secondary accounts. That's a completely redneck account. It's got a dominant position in a market that's still really fractured. Most people think, oh, hillbilly store, and they fail to realize that there are 3,000 of those stores nationwide. They have an above average index for number of kids, number of pets, and average income and market basket spent. So if I can't get treated the way I need to be treated by PetSmart or Pet whatever, Petco, where do you think I'm going to try and sell that stuff? It might not be to Tractor Supply. It'll probably be to Tractor Supply's next level down competitor, because I don't want to be in a business straight out of the gate that's got 3,000 locations. I want to be in one that's got a couple hundred, so if I fall on my face, my tuition isn't as expensive. So understand your accounts, understand your options. Strategy is important. Vendor numbers, we talked about all of this stuff. And that's how you get in touch with me. So 1 minute over.